Welcome to Books in 10. Remember, we're raffling an iPhone when we reach 10,000 subscribers.
Yeah.
Like, subscribe. Spinoza's ideas on rationality and civil liberties, well, they really laid the groundwork for modern democratic thought.
Yeah.
Want to join us as we kind of delve into Spinoza's influential arguments?
Yes.
And see how they're still relevant today?
Absolutely. You know, what I find fascinating about Spinoza is that he was writing in the 17th century.
Right.
Like a time of just immense social and intellectual upheaval. His ideas were, well, they were pretty radical.
Yeah.
Even dangerous back then.
I can imagine.
Challenging, traditional views of God's scripture and even the role of government.
Okay, so let's just jump right in. One of the first things that really stood out to me was Spinoza's take on superstition. I mean, he doesn't hold back at all.
Right.
Calling it a mockery of human wisdom.
Yeah.
He even uses, like, historical examples. Like Alexander the Great, turning to prophets and seers. But only when he was facing, like, setbacks. What do you make of this?
Well, Spinoza was deeply concerned about how fear can just, like, distort our thinking. He believed that when we're gripped by fear,
Right.
we're way more likely to just abandon reason and embrace irrational beliefs,
Yeah.
And this is a crucial point for him. Because for Spinoza, reason is, like, the key to true freedom.
So you're saying that if we want to be truly free, we need to be able to think rationally and not let our fears control us.
Exactly.
I mean, that seems so relevant,
Absolutely.
to today, wouldn't you say?
100%. I mean, just think about how often fear is used to manipulate people.
Oh, yeah.
Whether it's like fear-mongering in the media or politicians using scare tactics.
Oh, totally.
Spinoza would urge us to, like, be critical thinkers, to question everything and not to let our emotions just, cloud our judgment.
He sounds like a voice of reason in a world that can often feel very, very chaotic.
Absolutely.
Now, Spinoza was also pretty critical of religious dogma.
Right.
Arguing that blind faith and unquestioning acceptance of Scripture are actually signs of weak belief. But did he completely reject the Bible, though?
No, he didn't.
No.
He advocated for, like, a critical and impartial reading of Scripture. He argued that we should only, accept what is clearly stated and doesn't contradict reason.
Okay.
In fact, he even analyzed, like, specific biblical narratives, like the story of Moses hewing God's voice to show how they could be interpreted in a more rational light,
So he's not saying throw out the Bible. He's saying, like, use your brain when you read it.
Exactly.
That's a pretty nuanced approch, especially, for his time.
Right. Spinoza believed that we should be, like, active participants in understanding our beliefs, not just passive recipients of, dogma.
Okay.
He was really ahead of his time in that, regard.
Now, another area where Spinoza, like, challenged conventional thinking was in his view of miracles. He argued that miracles don't violate natural laws.
Right.
But are actually events that surpass our current, understanding.
Yeah.
Was he, like, saying that miracles don't exist?
That's a great question. I think it's important to remember that Spinoza saw God as the ultimate source of natural laws. So for him, a true miracle in the sense of something breaking those laws would be, like, a contradiction in terms.
So he's not denying that extraordinary events can happen.
Yeah.
But he's saying we shouldn't assume they, like, defy the laws of nature.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what's really fascinating here is how Spinoza compares interpreting scripture to interpreting nature.
Right.
He says both involve careful examination and, like, drawing conclusions based on evidence. He even points out that some passages in the Bible are just plain impossible to fully understand, which was a pretty bold statement for his time.
It's like he's saying that we should approach both, religious texts and the natural world with a sense of humility, recognizing that there's always, more to learn.
Exactly.
Okay.
He emphasized the importance of focusing on, like, the core message of Scripture, things like justice and charity, rather than getting bogged down in obscure details.
Right.
He would probably tell us to prioritize, living a good life over obsessing over every word in the Bible.
That sounds like a pretty practical approach to religion. Now let's kind of shift gears a bit.
Okay.
And talk about Spinoza's ideas about freedom and obedience. This is where his ideas about rationality and civil liberties really start to, like, take shape, right?
Absolutely. Spinoza was like a fierce advocate for individual freedom, but he also believed that true freedom, comes from understanding and following God's laws, which he saw as being essentially the same as the laws of nature.
So wait, how can we be truly free if we're, like, bound by laws? That seems like a contradiction.
Right. Well, that's where Spinoza's concept of freedom through understanding comes in.
Okay.
He believed that, when we truly understand the laws of nature, when we grasp how the universe works, our actions naturally align with those laws.
Okay.
It becomes less about, like, external rules and more about living in harmony with the natural order of, things.
So it's not about blindly following orders, but about aligning our actions with our rational, understanding of the world.
Exactly.
That's a pretty radical idea, even today.
It is, and it has, like, profound implications for how we think about the role of government.
Okay.
Spinoza believed that the sovereign power, meaning the government, should have the final say on, religious matters.
Whoa, hold on. Was he, like, advocating for a theocracy? That doesn't sound very
right.
freedom-loving.
Well, it's not that simple. Spinoza was deeply concerned with maintaining peace and stability in society. He saw religious disputes as, like, a major source of conflict.
Yeah.
And he believed that giving the sovereign power, ultimate authority, was the best way to, like, prevent chaos and ensure the common good.
So he's trying to balance individual freedom with the need for, like, social order. That's a tension that we still grapple with today.
Absolutely. And it's important to note that Spinoza wasn't advocating for, like, the suppression of religion.
Okay.
He believed that individuals should be free to, hold their own beliefs, but he also believed that outward expressions of religion should be subject to the laws of the state.
Right.
Just like any other activity.
That's a really interesting distinction. He's not saying people should be forced to believe, like, a certain way.
Right.
But he is saying that actions have, consequences, and that freedom of religion doesn't give you the right to, just do whatever you want.
Exactly. And this gets to the heart of some of the debates that, we're still having today about religious freedom.
Yeah.
And the limits of, like, governmental authority.
Right.
Spinoza's ideas are incredibly relevant to these conversations.
This is getting really fascinating. I'm starting to see how Spinoza's ideas about reason and freedom and the power of the sovereign are all, connected. But where do we go from here?
Well, to fully understand Spinoza's political philosophy, I think we need to delve, like, deeper into his concept of God.
Okay.
It's not what you might expect.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued.
All right, so let's pick up where we left off.
Okay.
Remember how Spinoza saw the laws of nature as being, like, essentially God's laws?
Yeah.
Well, to understand that, you have to grasp his concept of God.
Right. You mentioned it wasn't what people might expect. So what does Spinoza believe about God?
He believed that God is nature itself. It's called pantheism. Instead of seeing God as, like, a separate being who created the universe.
Right.
Spinoza saw God as the universe and everything in it as a, like, part of God.
So you're saying that for Spinoza, like, a tree, a rock, even you and I are, like, all part of God.
Exactly.
That's a pretty mind-blowing idea.
It is, and it completely, like, changes our understanding of ourselves and our place in the universe.
Okay, I'm trying to wrap my head around all of this.
Yeah.
How does seeing God as, nature connect to Spinoza's ideas about reason and freedom we talked about before?
It's all interconnected.
Yeah.
Remember, Spinoza believed that true freedom comes from understanding God's laws, which are the same as the laws of nature.
Right.
If God is nature, then understanding those laws, using our reason to grasp how the universe works, is essentially the same as, understanding God.
So by studying nature, by using our reason to explore, the world around us, we're actually, like, coming closer to God.
Yes.
That's kind of a beautiful concept.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it brings us back to the idea of, like, freedom through understanding. For Spinoza, the more we understand about nature, about ourselves and about our place in the grand scheme of things,
Right.
the freer we become.
So it's not about, rebelling against God's will or trying to please him. It's about like aligning ourselves with the natural order of the universe.
Yeah.
Which is essentially like God's order.
Precisely. It completely reframes the whole idea of, obedience.
Yeah.
It's not about like blindly following rules,
Right.
but about living in harmony with the universe.
This is really making me think differently about my relationship with everything. But how do we like actually live this way? I mean, it's one thing to say we should, live in accordance with reason and nature, but how do we actually put that into practice?
That's the million-dollar question. Spinoza believed that living ethically, treating others with like compassion and understanding was a key part of living in accordance with reason.
So it's not just about like intellectual understanding.
Right.
It's about, embodying those principles in our actions and how we treat others.
Exactly. And this is where Spinoza's ideas about like human emotions come into play.
Right.
He didn't believe that, emotions were something to be suppressed or ignored. In fact, he saw them as like a vital part of our nature.
Wait, I thought Spinoza was, all about reason.
Right.
How do emotions fit into that picture?
Well, that's a common misconception. Spinoza wrote like extensively about emotions, and he saw them as equally important as reason.
Okay.
He believed that understanding our emotions and learning to like manage them effectively was crucial to living, a good and fulfilling life.
Interesting. Did Spinoza give us any like practical tips for managing our emotions?
Well, while he didn't offer like a step-by-step guide or anything, he did offer some like key insights for Spinoza. Emotions were essentially tied to our perceptions of the world. If we perceive something as like good or beneficial to us, we experience joy. If we perceive something as bad or harmful, we experience, sadness or fear.
So our emotions are like kind of like a feedback system, telling us, how we're relating to the world around us.
Precisely. The key for Spinoza was to cultivate more like accurate perceptions based on reason and understanding, rather than, ignorance or prejudice.
Okay, I think I'm starting to see how this all, comes together.
Yeah.
If we can like learn to see the world more clearly, our emotions will naturally become more, aligned with what is truly good for us.
Exactly. And for Spinoza, what is truly good for us ultimately aligns with, our nature as rational beings.
It's like a positive feedback loop. The more we understand, the better we like manage our emotions, and the freer we become to pursue what's truly good and fulfilling in life.
You got it. And this leads to one of Spinoza's most famous and sometimes controversial ideas.
Okay.
That true happiness doesn't come from fleeting pleasures or external rewards. But from an internal state of understanding and accepting the world, as it is.
Wait a minute. That sounds a bit like we should just passively accept everything, even bad things,
Right.
Is that what he's saying?
It's not quite that simple.
What?
Spinoza wasn't suggesting like that we should passively accept suffering or injustice. He believed we should, strive to make the world a better place, but he also recognized that some things are like beyond our control.
So it's about accepting what we can't change while, still working to change what we can.
Exactly. For Spinoza, that acceptance, that understanding that we're part of like a larger order was key to achieving inner peace. That tranquility, isn't dependent on external circumstances.
It's like he's saying that true happiness comes from like within, from aligning ourselves with the natural order of the universe, rather than, from chasing fleeting pleasures or trying to force the world to conform to like our desires.
You're getting it. This idea has resonated with, people for centuries.
Yeah.
From like ancient philosophers to modern day thinkers. It's a profound insight into the nature of human happiness and how we can find meaning and purpose in a world that often feels like chaotic and unpredictable.
This is quite a journey we're on, with Spinoza. Finding freedom and happiness by like understanding and accepting the world as it is.
Yeah.
Even if we don't always, like what we see.
Right.
It's a challenging idea, but also like incredibly liberating. It's like he's giving us like a roadmap for living a more, fulfilling life, not just as individuals, but as part of a larger, like interconnected universe.
And that's the beauty of like Spinoza's philosophy, right? It's a holistic vision encompassing ethics, politics, spirituality, and even our understanding of, the natural world. It's a philosophy that still speaks to us, today, centuries after it was written, offering insights and guidance for like navigating the complexities of modern life.
It's amazing how a philosopher writing in the 17th century could have such a lasting impact on how we see the world today.
What's remarkable is that Spinoza's ideas, though, radical for his time, still feel relevant.
Yeah.
And even like urgent today. His emphasis on reason, freedom, and questioning dogma challenges us to think critically and engage in, constructive dialogue about the values that shape our world.
I think that's a great segue into the next part of our deep dive.
Okay.
We've talked about, Spinoza's concept of God and how it relates to his, ideas about freedom and understanding. But how did this all play out in his political, philosophy?
That's where things get really interesting, especially in light of the concerns about rationality and civil liberties that you initially shared.
Okay, let's dive into that in the next part of our deep dive into Spinoza. All right, so we've talked about, God, nature, freedom, and understanding. But you said you were really interested in Spinoza's thoughts on rationality and civil liberties. How do those all kind of come together?
Well, that's where Spinoza's political philosophy gets really interesting. He believed that a just and stable society had to be founded on reason. He argued that government should be based on, principles that could be understood and agreed upon by, rational individuals.
So instead of relying on, tradition or religious authority or the whims of a ruler, Spinoza thought the foundation of government should be something people could, reason their way to. That's a pretty revolutionary idea for like the 17th century.
Absolutely. It was revolutionary then, and it's still incredibly relevant. Today.
Yeah, clearly.
Think about how many conflicts come from disagreements about, fundamental values and beliefs.
Right.
Spinoza believed that if we could, ground our political systems in reason, we could create a more harmonious and just society.
But how does that, actually work? I mean, people have different ideas about what's rational.
And that's true, and Spinoza acknowledged that. He believes that a healthy society needs to allow for, a diversity of viewpoints.
Okay.
And that open debate and discussion were essential. He didn't think that everyone would, always agree, but he did think that through reasoned discourse, we could arrive at a shared understanding of what's best for the common good.
So he's not advocating for some totalitarian state where everyone is forced to think the same way.
Not at all. In fact, Spinoza was a strong advocate for freedom of, thought and expression. Yeah. He believed that individuals should be free to hold their own beliefs and to express those beliefs openly without fear of persecution.
That sounds a lot like our concept of, free speech that we value so much today.
Exactly. Spinoza saw freedom of thought and expression as essential for both, individual flourishing and for the health of society as a whole. He believed that suppressing dissent ultimately leads to stagnation and tyranny.
This is all starting to, click for me now.
Yeah.
Spinoza's emphasis on reason, his belief in the power of understanding, and his advocacy for individual freedom, it all comes together in his vision of a just and flourishing, society.
Right, precisely. And this is where his ideas about civil liberties really come into focus. He believed that individuals should have certain fundamental rights that are protected by the state rights that allow them to live freely and to pursue their own happiness without interference.
So, what kind of rights did he have in mind?
Well, he specifically argued for, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, and the right to, assemble peacefully.
Mm-hmm.
He saw these as essential for a free and open society where individuals could, think for themselves,
Right.
express their views and challenge authority without fear of reprisal.
It's amazing how these ideas that Spinoza was writing about
Hmm.
in the 17th century are still so relevant to the political debates we're having today.
It is. Spinoza's work reminds us that the fight for civil liberties is an ongoing process. It
Yeah.
requires constant vigilance and a willingness to defend these fundamental rights against those who would, seek to erode them.
So Spinoza's philosophy isn't just some abstract intellectual exercise. It's a call to action, an invitation to build a better world based on reason, freedom, and understanding.
That's a great way to put it. Spinoza's work is incredibly empowering. It reminds us that we have the capacity to shape our own, destiny, both as individuals and as a society. It challenges us to use our reason, to embrace our freedom, and to work together to create a world where everyone can flourish.
This has been an incredible deep dive.
Yeah, it is.
I feel like I have a whole new understanding of Spinoza and how his ideas can help us navigate the complexities of the modern world. What a brilliant and challenging thinker.
I agree. Spinoza's work is both, timeless and timely.
Yeah.
It speaks to the deepest questions about human nature, the meaning of, life, and the kind of society we want to create.
And remember, we're raffling an iPhone when we reach 10,000 subscribers. Like, subscribe, and journey into the bold ideas of Spinoza with us. Read the book.